finish up the crossword puzzle before we start taping Basil. Okay, you can help me with this. You're pretty good at these. Okay, let's see. Here's one. Rathbone in Sherlock Holmes. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, Basil, yeah. It fits, okay. Let's build off of that. Okay, Tibetan honorific. Okay, let's see. No, it can't be Dalai Lama because it starts with a B. Okay. Oh, okay. Yep, Buddha. That makes sense. Okay. Okay. Here's a pretty easy one. At least I think it is. Feline. Cat. Okay, good. Yep, that seems to work. Okay, next one. Brings forth. I don't know what it starts with, but it's got, it's a plural, total of 8 letters with the S included, presuming that it's a plural with an S. Okay, yeah, presents, that works. Okay. Okay, next one's a real small word. It's a real tiny word. Exists. And I don't have, it comes down off of Basil, so maybe it's off of the I in Basil. So it looks like, okay, is. Okay, good, okay. 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 Next one. Now, this is a little bit before your time, but I think I know what it is. The clue is boob tube, and it has in parentheses possessive. Oh, okay, yeah, yep. Well, boob tube, yeah, you're right. Television, you got that, Basil. I'm surprised you know that one, but that's good. Television, and it's possessive, so we've got to put an S at the end, and it does fit. That's excellent. Okay. Okay. Next clue. Utmost. Greatest. Okay. Yep. Okay. That's the right number of letters. Okay. Good. Okay. Next one. Off of presents. The last letter in presents. It starts with an S. 4 letters. Presentation. Okay. Yep, show, that works. Okay, I haven't come across any contradictions yet. Okay, good. Next one is a little further down in the puzzle. The clue is superior, and no, not mother. Okay, now we'll get on to that later with the Catholic Church, I think, because that's what you wanted to talk about. But and the birth control big deal. Superior, it's 6 letters. So mother would have worked, but it's not. Better, okay, superior, better, that's good. Okay, and next one is relative word. This comes down off of the first letter of televisions. So relative words, 4 letters, than, okay, good. Okay. Okay, next one is moving forward, and it's a long one. 11 letters. 11 letters, moving forward. You got to think about that one. Okay. It looks like from the other clues that it's got a V in the next to the last letter. Yeah, let's try progressive. That seems to work. And coming off of is, the second letter of is, it gives you a blank and sandwich. Okay, yep, soup. Okay, that seems to work. Okay. Oh. Welcome to Progressive with Soup. My name is David Stevenson. With us today, we have Basil BuddhaCat. Basil has a news show. We're going to talk about his news show on Comcast, but we're also going to talk about, Basil wants to talk about the recent snafu with the Obama administration indicating to churches or hospitals and healthcare plans run and administered for profit by churches that they need to follow the law, and if they have people under those plans, they have to at least offer as an option people the ability to get to get birth control. Specifically, the pill is what we're talking about and what the plans talk about. And now we know that the Catholic Church is opposed to the use of contraception, which includes birth control, which in fact we know that the birth control pill makes it, it allows for fertilization of the egg, but then makes it impossible or nearly impossible for the fertilized egg to implant itself on the uterus, on the uterine wall. So, but we'll get into that in a second. But Basil, I want you to tell a little bit more about your show. Okay, Basil acknowledges, and he wants to acknowledge the fact that I've been helping him with his show in his first 4 episodes, and he says he intends to keep me on because I'm doing a fair to middling job, he says. I'm doing all right, but my purpose in his show as his co-host is to translate for him, and correct me here, make sure I get this right, because Basil doesn't speak English. No, he's not an immigrant. Basil's been here his entire life, but being a cat, he never needed to learn English, and in fact says when humans learn to speak cat, then he'll be happy to learn to speak English, and he'll get there long before you will to learning your language, long before you learn my language, because my language is a series of complicated. It includes very complicated sounds which, to the human, to the untrained ear, all pretty much sound like either or he says that's to the untrained ear, that is accurate, but hey, look at other languages. Look at Spanish. Look at where in Spanish an inflection of the voice at the end of a word changes it from an answer to a question. That's a good point. I guess that's a good point, Basil. It seems to make sense. Yeah, but at any rate, so he has learned to speak what he describes as being not Cantonese. Now, as a little bit of background, Basil became very good friends with the good friend of Progressive Soup, John Kasumi. Now, Basil, in becoming friends with John Kasumi, and you can find Basil on Facebook, Basil BuddhaCat on Facebook, and you can friend him, and he says he may consider you. He feels a little slighted because one of the wives of a caller in on his show recently declined to contact him on Facebook. He got into a bit of a scuffle with a gentleman from South Carolina named Gerald who called in on the show, and he and Basil had some abrupt words and some disagreements. So Basil said, "Hey, since you're not going to continue the conversation in a civil tone, why don't you have your wife friend me on Facebook, and I'll watch out for her, and we can continue that discussion. I can continue it with her, since Gerald didn't quite meet Basil's level of civility when in discussing some issues over the Republican presidential campaign for nominating the party representative in November's election. So at any rate, so Basil has me on his show to interpret for him because Basil, in meeting John Kasumi, began getting friend recommendations through Facebook of John's friends, many of whom their names were not written out in English, but rather in Chinese characters, in not Mandarin, because Mandarin is the official government language in China, not the government language, so to speak, but the party language. And of course, as John will reinforce, there's a constitution in China. It's a very flowery document. It speaks many good things, but in fact, the constitution means little or nothing in the eyes of the Communist Party, who can reinterpret the usage of the Constitution at their beck and call. There is no government. There is only a party which rules the country. So at any rate, so Basil friended John Kasumi, and John John's friends began being recommended to Basil, and a lot of them, their names were not English but in Chinese characters. So Basil learned to speak not Cantonese, which is the more countrified dialect in China. It's not the official language of the Chinese government and country, but in fact it's the more countrified version of Chinese. And Basil learned to speak not Cantonese, that language, but he developed his own version called Catanese, and through much trial and error, he encouraged me, twisted my arm, in fact, to through threatening scratching, got me to learn to speak Catanese so I could interpret for him on his show. That's my purpose on his show, as being his co-host. Now Basil's been doing 4 shows so far, and he's got a bunch more in the hopper because he's had most of the Republican presidential candidates into his show. He had them on. He had Michelle Bachmann on. He had Newt Gingrich on. He had Rick Santorum on. He's narrowed the field down a bit, as they have. He's had Mitt Romney on for 2 shows, which should be on soon. Basil wants it noted that he actually takes 2 approaches to his show. He does a Friday night show, Friday night, 7 p.m., and that's a more politically oriented show. And then Basil also has the Sunday morning 10:30 to 11 time slot, right in the midst of the religious shows on television and some of the political shows on television. And Basil likes that spot because it gives him an opportunity to talk a little bit more with his guests in religious terms rather than in more overtly political terms, and put a little bit of a religious twist on the conversation. He wants to head right into this. We're 12 minutes into the show already, I guess, apparently. But Basil wants to wade right in to this big snafu about the Obama White House, telling particularly the Catholic Church is involved here, telling churches that administer health care, that have for-profit hospitals, that have their own health care plans for employees of the Catholic Church. Basil says that they're really twisting this matter around and standing it up, the whole argument on its head, because they're saying that the president is through his administration, through the federal government, is telling these institutions that they have to do something that they're morally or ethically or in one shape or form they're opposed to. Basil says he wants to bring out some very important comparisons that he's done a little bit of religious investigation on, and wants to make some comparisons and put this in what he says is the correct light. And he's got his list with him, and I've got them here too. And I want to make a note of it, and then Basil can correct me if, in fact, if I don't say it exactly right, Basil will correct me, no doubt. First of all, Basil says that there's a church out there, and granted, it's not a church with the size and scope of the Catholic Church. It's not as large, not as domineering in some parts of America. It's not as wealthy as the Catholic Church. But there's a church that believes, as part of their doctrine, that men should be allowed to marry women at any age and to bear children with them, and that's part of what that particular church believes. And I don't want to allude to any particular name of this church because one of the presidential candidates belongs to a more traditional, Latter-day Saints. Let's say it. But there are groups within the Latter-day Saints Church that believe that men particularly should be allowed to marry very young girls that have reached childbearing age, which sometimes with women is as early as 10 or 11 or 12. depending upon how their hormones come forth in life. And Basil says that if that's the case, if religious freedom should be observed and should be allowed and should be respected by the federal government, then allowing that church to have men married. Now, I want to give a little background. Basil, I want to step in for a second, Basil. I want to give a little background about the Latter-day Saints Church and the reason why during their history there have been some allowances for men marrying much younger women. Now, the church was constructed mostly of women, not a lot of men. So because of that, in order to go forth and multiply, as many people that read the Bible, in fact most, say is one of God's edicts to humanity, is to go forth and multiply, that the only way to do that with a fewer number of men than women was for men to have multiple wives. And to propagate, to increase their numbers, they allowed men to marry very young women. And in fact, men had a number of wives of different ages who all were, yes, okay, yep. I'm not going to say that, Basil, but let's just say they were doing the hoochie-goo in order to have more. Is that allowable? Yeah, okay. Basil says that's okay. It's not exactly what he said, but he thinks that's cute, and I can tell because his whiskers are twitching a little bit, and his right ear just flicked. And when his right ear flicks, I know he's been a little bit amused by something he's heard. Okay, so if that be the case, then certainly a church, albeit a small church, should be allowed to do that, and the federal government should not, through any laws, through any federal or state laws, should not be able to tell that particular church that they can't do that. That it's up to them. They're practicing their religious freedom, what they believe in. And okay, enough of that, Basil. But you've got some others here. But I want to go into one other one that I think is relative. And if you're insistent, maybe we'll do some more. But apparently, there are churches out there, there are small denominations out there that believe that children should, in fact, be allowed to work and to do adult work at any age. That it should be up to the parents to determine when a child goes to work, what kind of work they do, and what they do to help support the family. Now, that's not the church. No, it's not the Church of Gingrich. And that's a reference, of course. Basil wants to make that reference to something Newt Gingrich, one of the candidates for president on the Republican side, said along the way, is that he believes that in order to save money as a cost-saving benefit, that schools should allow children to, as part of their studies, to help do things like cleaning and small maintenance chores. And he thought that would, I presume, and Mr. Gingrich undoubtedly will let us know, that that would be a money saver because now a school could hire fewer maintenance employees and save money for the overall public that way. But you're right. It seems to be, and Basil's pointing this out, that it seems like what you're doing is you're taking dollars, you're taking salary out of the pockets of people who are undoubtedly, in many cases, parents of children in that school. So you're kind of turning child against parent in that you, I see your point, but turning child against parent to, as far as who's going to do the work and whether if the parent can't work because they lose their job because their children are doing their work, then in fact it creates a bad situation in the community. Oh, I didn't know you had the phone hooked up. Okay. How do I answer? It's Progressive Soup. I'm actually answering I'm presuming this is a call-in for Basil BuddhaCat. So I don't want to say Basil BuddhaCat Presents because this is Progressive Soup. May I help you? it's former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich. Okay, Speaker Gingrich, you've had your day in the sun on Basil's show. You've been on 2 shows, on a Friday night show at 7 p.m., and you've been on a show Sunday morning, 10:30. So I'm not sure. Basil, do you want me to take a question or a comment from Mr. Gingrich? Basil says, go ahead. What's it going to make a difference? Okay, go ahead, Speaker Gingrich, former Speaker Gingrich. Okay, he's saying that the money saved is more important than keeping little Johnny's dad working as a custodian at the school. But doesn't Johnny's dad, we'll call him Herbert, doesn't Herbert's salary get used to do things like buy their rent or their mortgage, pay for the rent or their mortgage, buy clothes for the family, including little Johnny, buy food for the table? Doesn't that get turned right back into the community? Doesn't that be recycled right back into the community? And also, if whether they're paying rent or paying a mortgage, somebody's paying property tax on the property, and because of their ability to pay property taxes, that helps benefit the school. Doesn't it all come full circle? In fact, okay. Mr. Gingrich is saying, Basil. Mr. Gingrich is saying that he hasn't really thought it through that far. He just put the idea out there. He thought it was important that kids be allowed to participate in taking care of their school, and that they would benefit from that. Okay. Hold on. Mr. Gingrich, Basil says that there are a lot of other things that kids could do to make themselves feel better, to make their school more presentable, that would be far more beneficial than taking away the job of custodians. Basil's adding in, what do you want to do, fire the teachers next and let the 12th graders teach the first graders? No, he says, of course that's not what he wants. He only is trying to figure out a way to show the voters in his party that he believes in cost cutting. Okay, well, Basil is rolling his eyeballs. They're up in his head right now. No twitch, no flick of the ear, no twitch of the whisker, but he's just seems to be a little bit beside himself. But anyway, thanks for calling in. It's former Speaker Newt Gingrich from Georgia, one of the Republican candidates. One quick question, Speaker. And Basil kind of gave me a nod that I should ask you relative to your campaign. Now, so far, former Massachusetts Governor Romney has won a couple of states. Or actually, he's won. Actually, he only won. Oh yeah, he did. He won New Hampshire and won Florida, and Florida was winner take all. So he got 50 delegates out of that. But former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum has now won 4 states. He did in fact edge out Mr. Romney in Iowa for delegates there in the caucuses in Iowa, and in fact won pretty substantially caucuses in the caucus in Colorado, and also won in Missouri and Minnesota. Now, you've only won Georgia so far. No, pardon me, next to Georgia, South Carolina. You've only won South Carolina so far, and your delegate count now is down below Mr. Santorum, certainly down below Mr. Romney, right around the numbers that former Congressman from Texas, Ron Paul, has. So in fact, Basil's saying, why don't you give it up? He hung up. Okay, fair enough. Okay, now we want to get back into this this idea about. Did you want to talk more about the birth control, or did you want to talk more generically about your show? Basil says he wants it known that it's important to note that on his Friday night show, 7 p.m. He's going to continue having Republican presidential candidates on. He wants to get not only current ones, but former ones. He wants to get his own personal favorite of the entire group, John Huntsman, who Basil notes is also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, but Basil finds him to be much more forthcoming, much more truthful, much more reasonable than the guy Basil refers to as that other guy. You mean former Governor Mitt Romney? Okay, yeah. He's going to have. He wants to get. He wants to get also former candidates on, candidates that are no longer in. Herman Cain. He wants to get Herman Cain on because he wants to talk with Herman Cain and one of the economic advisors from Progressive Soup, James Root, to talk about the flat tax. Because as you know, James Root is Progressive Soup's guru when it comes to things like the Federal Reserve, taxation, and things of that nature. So at any rate, Basil wants to get Herman Cain on. He wants to talk about all the issues that are involved. He also wants to get some folks in from CPAC. And CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Committee. And their convention has been a little bit intriguing in that they've had some folks there that are, in fact, avowed racists, and also folks that are conspiracy theorists. And Basil says that's the one thing that seems to bother him personally about Ron Paul's. That Ron Paul's attracted a lot of folks that Basil refers to as conspiracy theorists to his campaign. And Basil's had Ron Paul on. Basil likes a lot of what Ron Paul talks about. He likes the fact that Ron Paul, and you could go back and look through the archives and see these shows, that Ron Paul is very much against United States involvement in other countries on a whim. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up there for now, but we're gonna come back and do our Sunday. This is Progressive Soup. So we're gonna come back and do our Thursday 12:30 show, or as Basil's producer Kristen refers to it as noon 30. We're gonna do Progressive Soup's noon 30 show. We're gonna come back and do another segment of our interview with Basil BuddhaCat, learn a little bit more about his show, and that's it. Good night from Progressive Soup. Enjoy your evening.